Our city is, in some ways, not unlike a lot of other cities in America. We've undergone a number of transitions in our city, but we also have our own unique story.
I don't think people really realize how Little Rock got to look the way it did today. Many people, I think, assume it's there because it's natural, because that's just the way it developed, because, one line you could say is that, well, whites just live in areas with other whites because they feel like it, and blacks just live in areas with blacks because that's how the way they feel. They don't really understand that a lot of activism has taken place to actively create and construct those neighborhoods. They didn't happen naturally, they were man-made, very literally man-made, and were established that way and were consciously planted and perpetuated in that way. So it's not by chance, it's not by circumstance, it's very self-conscious. The city very self-consciously, geographically segregated itself from the 1950s onwards. The only way you really change them, as Little Rock has seen, is if you condemn them and tear them up and bulldoze them, then they're gone. It's proved a very effective and very enduring tool to ensure racial separation in Little Rock along geographical lines. I'm John Kirk, and I'm a Donaghy Professor and Chair of the History Department.
I'm Jess Porter, and I'm Assistant Professor of Geography in the History Department here at UALR. We are working on research that will help us better understand the spatial manifestations of change in Little Rock over time, particularly from a racial standpoint. So we're going to be able to see how neighborhoods changed and parallel that timeline with developments and policy that were happening in Little Rock.
From the 60s onwards, really, you start to see a real sprawl in Little Rock. And Little Rock has become known as one of the most sprawling cities in the United States. So its area has expanded enormously as it's expanded in its population. So that's one of the factors. But there's also a kind of microclimate operating within there in which, as that expansion took place, it was consciously racialized. And it was done through slum clearance, urban renewal, and specific African-American neighborhoods were often targeted for destruction, and they were bulldozed, and then those residents relocated into public housing which was predominantly built in the south and east of the city. And in Little Rock, what you see is the emergence of a city that was once a lot more integrated than it is today, and you go from residential patterns, at least, that were much closer in neighborhoods, to residential patterns that become much more dispersed, that the African-American population moves further and further out to the east, or is moved further and further out into the east through slum clearance projects and urban renewal.
Certainly, many people had the experiences that we see in the living room in Clyburn Park happened in living rooms in Little Rock, without question. And we have opportunities that present themselves for us to think differently based upon what we can learn from the past and perhaps make different choices that will lead us to a different urban landscape.
So what you really see, I think, in the second act of Clyburn Park is how historical consciousness is crucial to having that dialogue.
You can see these hard divisions in our city, and instead of, when we map it out and see so many stark contrasts of black and white when we look at income, when we look at race, I'd like to see more shades of gray.